Now that we have the girls and Newtonium out of the way, we can talk about the boys. First, we're going to start out with my replacement for Brick. Among the boys in the AU, Brick was someone I was a little more attached to than the others. I liked the push and pull he had with Gallium and the characterization that I had of him. Rusty, or Russ Gallium, is my replacement for Brick, and when compared to his AU counterpart, there's little difference in personalities, except Russ is actually protective of his brothers in a much more visible way. Brick, as he's depicted in the show, is colder and doesn't really care about anything but causing trouble. My version of Brick was also cold but did have some sort of loyalty towards Mojo and him. The boys Cypress, Sky, and Rusty are a result of Newtonium's academic rival stealing some of his research and creating 3 super-powered children of their own. The boys had been meant to be competitors for Blooming Melody, but because the rival was discredited and down on their luck, they turned to crime, using the boys to commit crimes and to get back at Newtonium and the girls. The boys were known as the Riot Boys back then. Just like with the AU, eventually one of the plans fell through and the rival lost custody of the boys and was imprisoned for their crimes. The Riot Boys spent much longer in the foster system than the Rowdy Rough Boys, spending a total of 4 years. The boys were tossed around from foster home to foster home, causing them to grow much closer to each other out of survival. Russ, being the smartest, understood more of what was going on and basically became a de facto parental figure of the other boys. Though being inexperienced and having Newtonium's rival as the only model of what a parent should be like, he tends to boss the other 2 around. By now he's pretty much given up on their creator coming back to get them. But should they turn up, Russ would be tempted to return to them. In terms of design, I thought it would be interesting to model more of Rusty's design after Gallium. I like the idea of one of the kids also having a floaty piece of hair. I also like the idea of one of the boys wearing their hair long like Brick did in the Rowdy Roughs. I went through a couple tries with Rusty playing more with his colors than his design before I settled on this. When I made his 5-point turnaround, I made his hair sharper and adjusted his jacket colors. I may do that again before everything is done. But overall, I am satisfied with where everything landed in terms of Rusty's design. He has been among the easiest out of the kids to transition from AU to original. I decided I liked the idea of Rusty being smart but not caring about his grades. Rusty, like Brick, took a long time to warm up to Gallium. But even after he warmed up to her, he's still guarded, not quite trusting adults after everything he's experienced. Overall, Rusty is a very smart and guarded little boy. He's grown used to having to play adult and is a little lost on what to do now with Gallium looking over the boys. Cypress, Gallium is my replacement for Butch. Like Clover, Cypress is pretty visually similar to his fan work counterpart. Black hair and green eyes with a green outfit. Also like Clover, he is also very different to his Powerpuff Girls counterpart, at least the latest version of Butch. Cy is actually quite similar to the first version of Butch in Powerpuff Girls before receiving the kiss of death. He doesn't say much. Previously, before being placed into the foster system, Cypress was loud and opinionated. He was often considered the loud, dumb one of the Riot Boys, whereas Rusty was the cool, smart one and his brother Sky was more of the sneaky, charming one. The reason for this change has to do with a traumatic incident from a really bad foster placement the boys had to be pulled from early by Ms. Patty. The foster parents did not like Cypress's personality and targeted him specifically, supposedly to set an example. That event is part of the reason why Rusty is so protective of his brothers now and does not trust adults easily anymore. Cy does still have a temper much like Butch. In the first few weeks of living with Gallium, he got riled up from his brother's goading and broke the television. Gallium just walked in as this was happening, and Cy, who had been previously loudly yelling, froze in place seeing her. Rusty instantly moved in front of Cy between Gallium and Cypress. Sky cowered off to side out of sight as if fearful he'd end up in the crosshairs. This all happened so quickly, but Gallium instantly gathered that something like this happened before. Contrary to whatever expectations the boys had, Gallium didn't respond loudly, instead crouched down to the boys' level and softly asked if everyone was all right. Televisions could be replaced after all. Something in this response made the normally stoic boy burst into tears, sobbing. Between the sobs and what Gallium understood, Cypress had meant to hit the wall instead of the TV with the remote he had thrown. But instead the remote ended up impaled in the television. The doctor listened quietly to Cypress's words. After all, it had been the most she heard out of him up to that point. When he was done, she softly told him that she would have preferred he didn't do either. But she can understand how something like this would happen. It was clear it had all been an accident. Rather than calming Cypress down, he ended up crying harder. As much as Gallium wanted to comfort him, Rusty stood strong as a barrier between them, not allowing Gallium to get close. So as a compromise, Gallium ended up handing a box of tissues to Rusty so he could pass it along to Cypress. After everyone seemed to calm down, Gallium gave a very soft lecture telling each of the boys that if they wanted to have nice things in the house they should try not to break them. She acknowledged that it was an accident, but asked for them not to do it again. "There's a time and a place to break things, you know," Gallium told each of them. The boys had been confused, and that is what led to their first trip to the junkyard that weekend. A later favorite activity for all three, but especially Cypress. Cypress's design, similar to Dr. Newtonium's design, was something that I couldn't quite nail down. My initial response was to basically copy what I did for the fan work back in 2024. But, coming back to this, I didn't feel like that was enough. So I ran through 9 different variations with different colors and a few different hairstyles and put it up to a vote. It was close between 8 and 9, but 9 won out by just 1 vote. So that's what I went with, but I would like to thank everyone for their feedback. It was super helpful. So moving along, I did as usual, made the 5-point turn. I have the concepts over here with some notes about which version won so I didn't get confused. And finally some notes about Cypress's character and some personality sketches. Something that I wanted to keep from changing too much is the character Clara. She was a background character that I had redesigned and had plans for in the fan work. She was the boys' friend at school and often helped Butch out in class. For as sensitive as Cypress is, having a character like Clara in his life would likely help push him out of his shell. So I have some notes about that here. I will get more into her character later, but as it stands now, I've renamed her to Imani. I thought that fit her character better, and it's honestly a very pretty name. So Imani basically has a similar role to Clara. Imani and Cypress met when the boys first arrived at school after Gallium enrolled them. The seating chart in their class only allows 2 students per desk, and Cypress ended up having to sit alone. Because the other students were well aware of who the Riot Boys were, no one wanted to sit next to him. Except for Imani. No one made her do it. A key factor I want to stress. This isn't some sort of situation where a teacher made her do it. Imani chose to do it. Imani and Cypress's relationship is very sweet. She seems to know what he's thinking without him having to say it. Which is a relief to Cypress, because outside of his brothers and Gallium sometimes no one else can really read him. Imani loves to talk and teach Cypress, who doesn't seem to mind listening. More often than not during class time she's quietly explaining things to him. And he hangs off of every word. Interestingly enough, his grades have shot up. Nowhere near Rusty's, but passing. But because of all of this, poor Cypress has a very obvious crush on Imani. As for how Imani seems to feel, well, she's a little less obvious about it, but it's clear she likes him too. Or at least that's what Cypress hopes. He'd be devastated if Imani didn't like him, or worse, was afraid of him like the other kids. Unfortunately for Cypress, his brothers have noticed his crush and tease him about it at home. They went out of their way to tell Gallium, who was pleased to hear of this development. This only served to embarrass Cypress, as it was clear the doctor thought it was adorable. Outside of Imani, Cypress does have an odd rivalry with Clover, but it's only in the context of recess football/soccer games. Outside of that, the two of them practically ignore each other. A contrast to Rosie and Rusty, who seem to compete academically, or Sky and Sunny, who have a push and pull situation socially. Outside of school or sports that Gallium has gotten him into, Cypress likes cooking and trying food. If no game is on, he's watching cooking shows with greater intensity than any game. Him and Gallium bond over learning how to cook different dishes in the kitchen, though it's to limited success. Sky and Rusty always dread when Gallium and Cypress get into the kitchen together, because they know it's going to be something weird. All in all, Cypress is a very sensitive kid, but he's slowly growing out of his shell living with Gallium. Though he still doesn't talk as often as he used to, he doesn't really need to, finding that the people who matter can understand him just fine without any words needing to be said.
Okay, so after a few days and a tie, we finally landed on a winner. Number 6 has won. For a while, I thought I was going to have to pick the color palette myself. How scary would that have been? Me? Pick something? By the way, did you guys know I'm a graduate art student and I'm a semester away from getting my degree? Anyway, when approaching Sky's character, like much of my process for the other kids and Dr. Newtonium, I considered where I was starting from. Boomer, who Sky is replacing, is considered one of the nicer, rowdy, rough boys, at least in fandom canon. When I approached his character in Powerpuff Melody, I considered the foster care system and constantly being rejected to be a cause for him to be more or less defeated. Boomer in Powerpuff Melody, as I was writing him, is a bit of a nervous wreck, more visibly than his brothers, because even if a child has superpowers, no child wants to be abandoned by their caretaker and then rejected over and over again. So, by the time the Rowdy Roughs got to Gallium, Boomer was tired. He didn't care about the Powerpuffs or Mojo. He just wanted to have a home. It was a pretty compelling difference between him and his brothers. Butch was angry and didn't know what to do with that anger. And Brick was hoping against hope that him or Mojo would come back. Two of them were holding on to the past while Boomer wanted to move on. Gallium symbolized that for him, which is why he became pretty attached to her pretty quickly, being the first to call her mom out of all of the boys. Sky Gallium, his replacement on the other hand, is very different, despite some visual similarities in terms of hair and eye color. But regarding his personality, well, I've already sort of indicated in Cypress's video, Sky is manipulative and sneaky. Sky at one point may have been nicer like Boomer. During those early days after the Riot Boys creation, the name for my rowdy rough boys, Sky could have been sweet and kind. If he was his brothers, can't recall him ever being any different. Sky, in some way, has always been like he is. Maybe the fact he and his brothers were made to be copies of the blooming Melody Girls, made from a place of greed and envy rather than curiosity and admiration. The blooming Melody Girls had been an accident, but they were no less loved. For the Riot Boys' love and affection were very conditional. Maybe that was why Sky turned out the way he did. Sky, in a similar vein to Rusty, does not value people, while Rusty only values people once they become one of his people. Sky sees most people as pawns or toys, sources for his amusement. During those early days they spent with the Newtonium's rival, Sky often manipulated them to keep them from reacting rashly after failed plans. There would often be more bruises from tantrums after failed schemes than the ones gotten during fights with blooming Melody. Sky quickly learned how to direct that anger they had into something more productive against the girls who got in their way. After the boys were taken into the foster care system, Sky continued this behavior, often becoming the more favored child amongst the boys. Several families tried to adopt him by himself, but Sky refused to leave his brothers. Sky is a bit cowardly by nature, though that may not be the right word to use. Rather, Sky doesn't like pain or discomfort. There's just something about being hurt that reminds him too much of them. Sky, like Sunny, loves to socialize with the kids at the school. He's become quite popular, especially among the girls. His sweet, innocent appearance is enough to charm most girls in their grade and from others. However, unlike Sunny, Sky does not treat the other kids like they're his friends. To Sky, they're more or less toys or objects. One of his favorite things to do is to quietly pit some of the kids against each other and watch the fallout. However, much like those days bygone, Sunny and her sisters often get in his way. Sunny has done her best to strip Sky of his social status to prevent him from starting any more trouble. Unfortunately for her, Sky knows exactly what he needs to say in order to stay put at the top of the social ladder above everyone else. After all, Everyone loves the sob story of the sad little boy who's just learning how to be normal. Oddly enough, despite his manipulative nature, Sky values honesty the most. If a person is honest and genuine, Sky is more keen to like them. Perhaps that's why he's grown to like Gallium. The doctor is honest almost to a fault, amusing Sky greatly. And yet she picks up on his manipulations every time, whereas an innocent smile and a head tilt would be enough to throw most other adults off. The way that Gallium looks at him, though, makes him feel almost like when she looks at him, she sees someone else. Similarly to Boomer, Sky does call Gallium Mom, but not for the same reasons. Outside of playing tricks, Sky loves making deals and bets. It's the best way to convince him to do anything. Nothing is more thrilling to Sky than a good bet. Despite how tempting it is, Sky doesn't cheat. He prefers honesty in betting. So one day when it was raining and Sky had nothing better to do, he challenged Gallium to beat a level at a video game that the boys had all gotten stuck on. There was no real prompting. It was just an idea he had after spending a few minutes on it and looking up to see Gallium on the couch, vaguely watching the game. He looked at her with a smile and said, "Hey Doc, want to make a bet?" This hadn't been the first bet Sky had made with Gallium, so she understood instantly what he meant. It seemed the doctor had been bored too, and she agreed. The rules of the bet were simple. If Gallium couldn't beat the level, they would get fast food for dinner. Something Gallium only reserved for treats every so often. "And if I beat it?" Gallium asked, taking the controller. Sky smiled a bit more, looking like he already had something in mind. "I'll call you Mom for a day, that's so?" Gallium questioned, seeming more amused by the idea of Sky calling her mom with each moment. "Yup, the whole 24 Doc," Sky replied. The deal was struck, and needless to say, Gallium beat the level. Sky, true to his word, called Gallium Mom for 24 hours. He had hoped, by being a good sport, he'd get fast food for dinner, but Gallium reminded him that's not how bets worked. If you insist on dealing in bets, then you need to follow the rules of engagement, Sky, she reminded him. "Yes, Mom," Sky replied sarcastically in response. Interestingly enough, even when the 24 passed, Sky still called Gallium Mom. The doctor didn't say anything, suspecting the little boy may have wanted to call her that for a while, but couldn't think of a reasonable excuse. So she kept quiet, pretending to not have realized what was going on. If only to let the little guy save face in front of his brothers, who tease him about losing a bet to her. In terms of design, Sky was a bit more difficult than the other boys to design. I ran through multiple iterations. I liked the soft boy look. I also played around with giving him more princely hair, but I couldn't quite get it right back in 2024. This hadn't been intentional, by the way, but I ended up with all three boys in Letterman's. I had to look that up, Letterman's jackets. Which is fine. It sort of gives the boys a more uniform look as well, though less superhero-y than the girls. All in all, I'm pretty happy where things have landed on both the boys and the girls. I've got a few more characters to redesign and restructure, but now that we have the main cast completed, I can move on to doing other sort of content with them and developing the world around them. Tell me what you guys think so far. Do you think these changes are good? I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments. I'll see you all in the next video.